Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm going to start in just a moment, inshallah. Okay, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum
It's
salam.
good, inshallah. Welcome, everyone. Bismillah. Welcome, everyone. Excuse me. Let's see. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Not now. You're on mute again.
How's that? Can you hear me okay now?
Now I can hear you.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Thank you. I hope the sound is okay. I usually use headphones because the sound is a little better when I do, but my headphones are acting up. I need a new connector. So inshallah, I guess it's better for you to hear me, even if it's a little imperfect and not hear me at all. But if the sound begins to be problematic in any way, if you hear echo or something like that, please let me know so I can address it, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Danielle. Is that you pronounce your name?
Yes. Wa alaikum salam, brother. Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm new.
Alhamdulillah. Welcome. We're glad to have you. You hear about it from hear about our class from Sister Angelica?
Yep. Yep.
Alhamdulillah. Very good. Alhamdulillah. May Allah continue to bless and protect and elevate and increase our sister. Give her tawfiq.
Ameen. Ameen.
What she's doing. Alhamdulillah. And anybody who's not aware, we're referring to a sister by the name of Angelica Lindsay. She goes by the tag name of the village auntie. So check out her work, inshallah. Maybe we'll bring her one day to talk a little bit about some of her work. And some of her work, I'll share that, she deals with issues of women's health, sexual health, intimacy, all from a Sunnah perspective, Muslim couples therapy, all of that good stuff. But one of the things that we discussed is in preparing to do that work, she studied some of the relevant fiqh around, those issues. So inshallah, maybe I've even gone to her myself to kind of double check some things when I have certain questions. So maybe we can bring her in this space as well, but definitely check her work out. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and open up with dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدر العظيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وذرياته أهل البيت كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المصير الرجال ومن عذاب النار رسول المصير اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد رضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا همة الشيخ اهدرنا بهذا المحضر والتحظى بنظرة تعدينا بظهر أما بعد. So welcome again, everyone, both on Zoom and YouTube. Because I know we have, alhamdulillah, Sister Danielle, who's here, and then also maybe some other new people on YouTube. I want to start by kind of going over a little bit of what we're doing here, what the books we're using, all of that good stuff. I know that's old hat for a lot of you all, but as I've said again and again and again, the more you review, the better, because inshallah, you all will be sharing this information with people and you should be able to explain, where you got the information from. So my name is, alhamdulillah, excellent. My name is Habibur-Rasul. And people call me, if you want to call me something, you can call me Ustadh. I'm not the sheikh, neither in knowledge or in age. So you don't have to give him that title. I am a professor. You'll hear people call me Rasul. That's my name, my legal name. Sometimes people will call me Dr. Rasul. Sometimes people call me Habibur-Rasul. People will call me Habib. All of that's good. I'm not super big on formality. The only reason I don't stop people from giving me a title is because I do think that it's good for us to cultivate a culture of giving people respect, respecting the knowledge, respecting the work. My big brothers and sisters and mentors and teachers, they always tell me, that's important. If it was up to me, I'd just be like, I ain't tripping. But that culture and that sunnah is important, right? I say that sunnah because not to say that I can cite a specific hadith that justifies it, but we know this is a sunnah among the Muslims, right? This is a part of our tradition. Globally, as well as here in this part of the world, it's especially important when we have so many elders who put in a lot of work, who have often been disrespected in spite of the work they put in. It's especially important, for us to be in the habit of giving people their title, giving people their due. But if you don't do it with me, I ain't tripping. My teacher that I took this information from is a scholar by the name of Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal. Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal, alhamdulillah, he's still with us. May Allah preserve him. He has had some health challenges in recent years. Alhamdulillah, for people that, who know about that, he is getting better. Alhamdulillah, he is healing. But at the moment, he's not giving regular classes. But Sheikh Amin, I spent about 7 years, studying with him, and, continuing to learn from him since that time, of course. And Sheikh Amin has been learning and teaching fiqh according to the Maliki madhab longer than any person that I know of in America, right? He started studying this stuff in the late 60s. And, at a time when people weren't really, you had some few scholars around that time, or maybe a little bit after, who had some knowledge of things like madhab, but they didn't make that the basis for how they taught, for a lot of different reasons. Islam, in some sense, was kind of still in its early stages, right? And Muslims been here for a long time, but because of the transatlantic slave trade and whatnot, maintaining the transmission of knowledge was challenging, right? So Sheikh Amin represents an important node in this history of, us in this part of the world studying according to what people might refer to as the traditional way of following the madhab. He said when he started studying with his teacher, he wanted to learn how to recite Quran in Arabic. He wanted to focus on that. And his teacher said, nah, other people are learning that, but nobody's studying this information according to a madhab. So I want you to stick with this, because if you stick with this, people won't be able to fool you anymore. So his teacher was a big Egyptian scholar by the name of Dr. Suleiman Dunya, rahmatullah alayhi. Before I met Sheikh Amin, or knew anything about Sheikh Amin, I had heard stories about Dr. Dunya from my father, who actually took Shahada from Dr. Dunya. So I have a personal connection and can bear witness to the benefit that he brought coming to this part of the world and teaching primarily working class Black folk. He didn't have no problem teaching in the hood. So that was Dr. Dunya. And he was a big, scholar in Egypt. He was the head of the departments of theology and philosophy at Azhar University. So, he was an expert on Aqidah. He also was an expert. He was a Ghazali scholar. And he also had expertise and wrote books on the sort of philosophical tradition in Islam. Wrote books about people like Ibn Sina and whatnot, from like a historical kind of, analytical perspective, if you will. But he also was a scholar of fiqh. He was one of the highest Maliki authorities, really, as a scholar at Azhar in the subject of Maliki fiqh. So that's where we get this information from in terms of who we learned it from. And the book that we are studying. So to give some backstory, there's a book, if you look at the foundations of the Maliki madhab, right? Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi, he was known as the scholar of Medina. He spent all his life in Medina, and he dedicated himself to taking knowledge from all the scholarly people in Medina from the early generation. So he was in a time when you still had tabi'een, people from the third generation, where you have Sahaba, the second generation and third generation. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ told us that those are the three best generations. So he was able to learn from some of those tabi'een and collected sort of the methodology of the scholars of the Prophet ﷺ city, because he felt this would give the best, most complete picture of the Sunnah of Muhammad ﷺ in its complete stages. Now, other madhab have different approaches. Other schools of thought, if you will, have different approaches. For instance, in the Hanbali madhab, there's a big emphasis on textual proof. Bring the hadith, right? You find a lot of people who call themselves Salafi today. They've been influenced by that, but they don't necessarily, if they haven't studied, they don't necessarily know that that's where they're getting that from. That there is one school of thought that emphasizes bring your proof, bring the hadith, and that's a valid school of thought. And there's another school of thought that emphasizes, well, what did the most knowledgeable people of the Sunnah who lived in the Prophet ﷺ city, right? What did they say about a thing, right? And if what they say about a thing, among consensus among them, or the very scholarly people among them, if that has some kind of slight nuance difference from a hadith, even if the hadith is strong, Imam Malik would, in some cases, defer to the position of the scholarly people of the Prophet ﷺ city. So that's a really quick kind of simplified explanation of some of what kind of distinguishes the Maliki madhab. And even a scholar like Ibn Taymiyyah, who, if you know about this stuff, the Salafi folks, they hold him in very high regard. He was a Hanbali scholar, but he wrote a book about the Medinan way, right? So he recognized in his time even the validity of this approach of Imam Malik. I'm sharing this stuff with you because I know in the times we live, these are things that you need to be able to go to, because the traditional way is sometimes under attack by people who don't understand what this is about. So the kind of one of the foundational texts of the Maliki madhab is a text called the Mudawwana. And it's like I don't have any, I haven't really engaged Mudawwana at all. Well, first you have Imam Malik's Muwatta, right, which is the oldest collection of hadith, but it's not a collection of hadith in the way that other books like Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim are collections of hadith. It's a collection of hadith that is meant to hadith and athar, hadith and accounts of some of the Sahabas and scholarly people that serve as the basis for his fiqh, right, for his legal rulings. Having said that, it's seen as an authentic, reliable book. But when people talk about the most reliable books of hadith, they don't always include the Muwatta because the nature of the book is a little bit different. It wasn't intended just to be a collection of sound, strong hadith per se. It was a collection of hadith and accounts of Sahaba to justify his legal opinions. But then from there, we have a book called the Mudawwana, which is a sort of bigger compendium of Maliki rulings. And as time went on, scholars created shorter, more accessible books for people to learn the madhab. So there's a book called the Mukhtasar of Khalil, which sometimes people talk about as sort of like the top book that you learn in the madhab, unless you get into like books like the Mudawwana that are like really, really expansive, more for, scholars who are giving rulings and stuff like that, I would say. But and Mukhtasar literally means like sort of abridgment, right? So the Mukhtasar of Khalil is a sort of condensement of the Maliki madhab, but it's still a thick book, right? And you have a scholar from the later Maliki school. When I say later, we're talking about 18th century, named Sheikh Ahmed Dardir. Sheikh Ahmed Dardir was one of the leading authorities of the Maliki madhab in his day. He was an Egyptian. He was a scholar at Azhar. He was a descendant of Sayyidina Umar, the second Khalifa after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's returning to Allah. And Sheikh Ahmed Dardir was, in much the same way that Dr. Dunya kind of as sort of one of the last scholars, some would say, or later scholars in this tradition. Sheikh Ahmed Dardir before him was a scholar of Sharia or fiqh and Aqidah or theology and Tasawwuf or spirituality. There are miracles that were attributed to him in Egypt, where you had an oppressive ruler that was keeping food from the people. And Sheikh Ahmed Dardir was able to go to the place, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He was able to go to the place where the food was being kept from the people, and he made dua, and the locks of the door fell off and the door opened. It was like a series of doors. And, this is a miracle that's attributed to him. And we believe that Allah Ta'ala can bless people, in these miraculous kind of ways, right? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi. Welcome. So this is Sheikh Ahmed Dardir, and he wrote several books of fiqh. He has a commentary on the Mukhtasar of Khalil. I think it's called Ashar al-Kabir, if I'm not mistaken. But then he has a book called Aqrab al-Masalik, where he took the Mukhtasar of Khalil and sort of condensed it a little more. And then he wrote a commentary on that called Ashar al-Saghir. So this is one of the most authoritative works that people go to in the Maliki madhab for rulings. They use it in the graduate level at Azhar University. And Dr. Dunya basically taught from this book to Sheikh Amin. But he didn't teach it word for word. The Shara Sagir is a very long book, and it's a book that even people who are fluent in Arabic will struggle with if they're not trained in fiqh. So Dr. Dunya, he said, we're not going to do what normally you do. If you have somebody as a child, you maybe teach them a book like Akhdari, which is an introductory book in the madhab, and then maybe a book like Ashmawiya, and then a book like Ibn Ashar, Murshid al-Mu'in is another name for it you might have heard of. And then, Muqaddimat Taziyah, and then you go on to books like Risala, Siraj Salik, and on and on and on until finally, when you kind of like have a nice, years worth of engagement with the madhab, you touch a book like Ashara Sarir. Dr. Dunya said we're going to go straight to Ashara Sarir because the people in this part of the world, your people, they need access to this information. And so he didn't teach it to him word for word. He taught him lessons taken from Ashara Sarir and focused on the subjects that he thought were most relevant for us. So I always give the example. He didn't teach like zakat on livestock and things like that. He focused on, the sort of foundational stuff that the people would need to do their obligatory ibadah, right? So things like rulings on tahara, how do you cover, salah, how do you find the qibla, what sutras that you put in front of you when you pray, things like this. Different dua and different questions that arose over the years of Dr. Dunya teaching this class. So that's what we have. We, Sheikh Amin compiled those lessons and into a book that hasn't been published or anything. You have to sit and study with him to get access to the book. And you take your notes, and once he looks at your notes and says, okay, you understand this subject, and this subject we need to review. This subject you got pretty much, but just change this. And then once he says, okay, you understand the material, he gives you the book and he gives you the ijazah to teach the book, right? And so I always say that it's my hope that some of you all are taking your notes, and at some point, will show me some notes so that we can, maybe talk to Sheikh Amin and, give you some ijazah so that you can continue teaching this information, inshallah ta'ala, and the line can keep going. So if you do that, that will make me happy, right? So this is what we're teaching from. Sheikh Amin would just say we're teaching from Ashara Saghir, right? Because this is what the information is coming from. But just to give you a little bit more context, we're not teaching from the actual text. Now you back in the days you didn't have anybody else teaching this text. Now I've heard you have a couple of African American Muslim brothers out there in the world who studied to the point where they're teaching from this book directly, and they don't necessarily have many students, right, that at that point. But alhamdulillah, the tradition is growing and growing and growing. So yes, Sister Danielle, I see your hand is up.
Thank you so much for that recap. I've heard you say that in the recordings, Ashara Sarir, and I've been Googling it and I can't spell it. I know I'm spelling it wrong.
I'll type it. And I always say Ashara Sarir, but it's actually Shar Asarir. I kind of mispronounce it, but it's Shar Asarir, which literally means the diminutive explanation, right? Shar means explanation, and Saghir means like little, but in this case they translate it as diminutive. It's not that it's little, but it's detailed and accessible, I guess, is maybe a way you could transmit the meaning of what they mean by Saghir here. Alhamdulillah. So I'll stop there in the way of introduction. This is good, because I feel like we gotta, talk about this a lot as new people come. Alhamdulillah. And someone typed a question directly into the chat, and so Danielle and also Sister Danielle and also anybody else who may be on YouTube but may join us in the Zoom. I don't think you can do this in YouTube, but in Zoom you have the option of asking questions directly to me or asking questions to the group. If ever you have a note or a question that you want to ask anonymously, just send it as a direct message. And if you want to ask it for everybody to see, then send it as a message to everyone, inshallah ta'ala. But just as a quick response to something someone said in the chat. So I don't cover zakat in this class, or at least I haven't as of yet. I may, if we go through the book maybe one more time, this is like our second time going through the book. If we go through the book a third time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, welcome. We may go through another book called Murshid al-Mu'in. And I should also say that in addition to studying with Sheikh Amin, I had the opportunity to spend about a year in Senegal and with my Sheikh Muhammad al-Sisi, who directed me in studying with a couple of teachers, a scholar by the name of Ustadh Barham Sal, who is a Senegalese scholar, Azhari, who studied from Sheikh Mai's father, Sidi Ali Sisi, who's still there. Alhamdulillah, may Allah preserve him. And also from a scholar by the name of Ustadh Ahmed Fall, who was a big scholar from Mauritania, who was from a big scholarly family. Both his brothers are big scholars, still around now. One of his brothers, a man by the name of Sheikh I want to get his, I think it's Sheikh Hassan Muhammad Hassan al-Khadim, I think is his name. He wrote a book called Purification of the Heart, which like Hamza Youssef and some other people translated. People rarely tell you that he's Tijani when he referenced this book, though, interestingly enough. But anyway, I don't want to start set tripping out here. But so I had the opportunity to study with them as well. And I definitely incorporate things that I learned from studying with them. We studied, a lot of the introductory books in the madhab. So I've studied those as well. And things that I've learned over the years from spending time with Sheikh Mahi, and a little bit of time I've had to spend with Sheikh Hassan Sisi, and the other brother, Imam Sheikh Tijani Sisi. So, this is not a class that is only for people in the Tijani Tariqa by any means, but that's the path I follow. And I really started teaching this class because Sheikh Amin taught me and wanted me to teach. And my brother and also my teacher, Sidi Kaaba Abdul Fattah, may Allah preserve him, he set up this platform called the Ruhul Adab Group, mainly for people in the Tijani community. So I make sure I speak to issues that will be of interest to people of Tasawwuf, people in the Tariqa. But this class is not just for people in any Tariqa or anything like that. You don't have to be in the Tariqa in this class. It's not, this is fiqh. So this is for everybody. But because I know a lot of the people in this class are from the Tijani community or just interested in Tasawwuf broadly, I sometimes will go into discussions about fiqh related to issues of Tasawwuf. And I, like I said, once we go through the book another time, we may go through a book called Murshid al-Mu'in, Ibn Ashur, which has, or some other books too that we studied in Senegal that have, discussions about zakat and hajj. So we may get into that, if people are interested as we go further along. But our foundation, we're studying this text, and this text doesn't go into issues of zakat or anything like that. It's funny, we would ask Sheikh Amin questions about zakat, and he would give us the real elementary answer, 2.5%, And if you ask him more, he would say, I'm not an expert in the area of zakat because my teacher, he said, most of my students are people that would be eligible to receive zakat. They're not people with money, not people with wealth. So he didn't spend a lot of time, going into the finer points of zakat and whatnot. He's very practical, So, Assalamu alaikum. Oh, I had to go on mute, I think. But in the future, like I said, perhaps we'll cover some of those things. Someone asked if we're going to cover fasting as Ramadan approaches. Yes, we're going to cover fasting. I'll probably in the couple of weeks leading up to Ramadan, I'll probably, divert from the course of the book as we've been going and cover fasting. Sheikh Amin did teach us what he learned from Dr. Dunya on fasting, but to give it a little bit more structure, I usually use a book called Ashmawiyah, another introductory Maliki fiqh book that's been translated in a really accessible way in English. I usually use that to give us some organization to the discussion on fasting. So yes, we're going to do that as Ramadan approaches, inshallah ta'ala. Mashallah. So someone asked a question that I think is a good question. They said, are there specific schools or traditions within the Maliki madhab? And if so, which tradition specifically are we learning? So in the Maliki madhab, there are different schools in the sense that different regions, and maybe to a certain extent, you can even say different institutions, but for the most part, in the community of Malikis historically, people talk about different schools as the approaches within the Maliki madhab that became popular in certain regions, right? So you have the Andalusian Maliki school, or Moorish Spain Maliki school, the North African Maliki school, the Azhari Maliki school, the Iraqi Maliki school, right? I don't think they generally talk about Senegal and Mauritania as having its own school, but practically speaking, we can think about that even as, the Maliki tradition in that region as being somewhat distinct, right? So I would say the Maliki school that we are taking from is first off the Azhari Maliki school, because that's the book that we're studying is from an Azhari scholar. We need an Amriki Maliki school, mashallah. Well, we're building it. That's really, I say one of the reasons, there's a lot of reasons why I followed a Maliki school. One is just because, alhamdulillah, that's what I had access to. Allah guided me to a beautiful teacher in Sheikh Amin who happened to be Maliki. But then there's also a cultural affinity. Most of the sub-Saharan African people that were brought here in to the Americas would have been Maliki. And then there's also a practical issue where the Maliki madhab, as well as the Hanafi madhab, I'll say, have good tools for us to use in figuring out how to apply the Quran and Sunnah to our lives in a context where, it's not a majority Muslim country, where there's a lot of religious diversity, right? If you look at the Malikis in Andalusia, right, more Spain, the Muslims were in charge, so it's still different than what we're dealing with now, where we don't have power. But it was still a society where you had Muslims, Christians, Jews all together. Even in West Africa, West Africa is actually a good example because there were times when the Muslims weren't in power, but they had proximity to power, meaning the ruler may not have become Muslim, but he liked the Muslims enough that he gave them the freedom to practice and to teach and to build wealth, right? So in West Africa, you always had these Maliki scholars who operated in places where people followed different religious traditions, right? And similarly in the Hanafi school in South Asia, you find a similar kind of context. But in the Maliki school, the fact that Imam Malik rahmatullahi put a good evaluation on the importance of urf, like custom, local custom, what they call maslah, public, the public good, right? What's in the interest of just the good of society, these kind of things. It makes it a little bit easier for scholars operating within a Maliki framework to address issues that come up that may be a little different than what came up during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, Sister Danielle, did you have your hand up a second time? Was up? Okay. But just to finish answering that question, the Maliki school of Azhar is the one that's, I would argue, or from my limited knowledge, seems to be the most textually sound, because if you look at a lot of the big Maliki texts, a lot of them come from Azhari scholars like this one. Also, Dr. Dunya rahmatullahi was an Azhari, right? So Sheikh Amin, by extension, is an Azhari. I would give him that title for sure. We're studying from the Azhari Maliki school, the Egyptian Maliki school. But what's interesting is Sheikh Ibrahim Niass, may Allah be pleased with him, who is the founder. I think everybody I see, at least in the Zoom, I think has heard me talk about Sheikh Ibrahim or know about Sheikh Ibrahim. There's some numbers here I don't recognize, so I'll say Sheikh Ibrahim Niass was one of the most, if not the most, sort of prolific and influential West African Muslim scholar of the 20th century. And there's a lot of, West African Muslim scholars of the 20th century. Why I feel like I can say that with conviction, and I'm biased because Sheikh Ibrahim is the scholar of the Sheikh of Tasawwuf that we take from, but also, his organization, his community of followers in his lifetime reached a number where it became, according to some historians, the single largest religious community on the African continent ever. We're talking about maybe about as many as 100, some say 60 million, some say 100 million followers, because he was Senegalese, but he didn't have as many followers in Senegal as he had in places like Nigeria, Ghana, Sudan, Mauritania, all these places. And he was also unapologetically Pan-African. He was close to Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser. He was critical of Gamal Abdel Nasser in certain actions that he took, but he still supported Gamal Abdel Nasser in his support of Pan-Africanism and a kind of Islamically informed Pan-Africanism. In any case, Sheikh Ibrahim studied from his local scholars in Senegal, right? He didn't go off to Morocco or Egypt or anywhere like that to study. But his scholarship was such that when he went to these different places, they recognized him and gave him big titles. He went to Morocco and he got, ijazah from Sheikh Ahmed Sukairij, right? He was one of the big scholars in Morocco who, gave him all these ijazahs, but basically said, he was already, like the leading scholar, basically. He went to Egypt and the Azhari Shuyukh, they gave him the title Sheikh al-Islam for Ifriqiya, which is almost, you can think of it like an honorary degree, said he's the Sheikh al-Islam for Africa. Sheikh Muhammad al-Hafiz, may Allah be pleased with him, from Egypt, who was the leading scholar of hadith in his time. He said about Sheikh Ibrahim that he was, so Sheikh Muhammad al-Hafiz was a hafiz of hadith. He memorized something like 100,000 hadith and their interpretations in isnad. He said Sheikh Ibrahim is a hujjah of hadith, meaning he memorized some 400,000 hadith or more and their isnad and their interpretation. So all these scholars gave him these recognitions. In Saudi Arabia, they asked him to be the president of the Rabiata Islamiyya, the Muslim World League, which is essentially a kind of like Salafi organization, but they wanted him to be president. He said, I won't be president, but I'll be vice president. So he was the founding vice president. And even with all of that, I say all that to say, even though he's not a product of Azhar, when he went to Azhar, the Azhari shuyukh, they saw in him someone who tended toward a lot of the rulings that are popular in the Azhari Maliki school that aren't as popular in the North African, or if we can say there's a West African school, the sort of West African Maliki school. And the sort of, iconic example of that is where Sheikh Ibrahim put his hands when he prayed. A lot of the Malikis from North Africa and West Africa, they pray sadl, meaning they pray with their arms to the side. Sheikh Ibrahim was distinct in that he prayed with his arms folded and told his followers to do the same. And this is a position that you find is more popular among the Maliki scholars in Egypt, the Azhari school. And I just noticed over time, man, I would ask Sheikh Mai questions, or I would hear statements attributed to Sheikh Ibrahim or Sheikh Hassan or Imam Sheikh Tijani Sisi. And I would ask questions of Sheikh Amin about what Dr. Dunya said. And their positions were for the most part, almost always aligned. There might be some few areas here or there where they favored different positions, but for the most part, their positions were very much in sync, which I found to be very striking, because that's not the case with other Malikis, in America that I talked to who've studied from other scholars and other sort of traditions within the Maliki madhab. So there's a kind of synergy, I would say, between the way of Sheikh Ibrahim and the way of the Azhari Malikis. And both Sheikh Ibrahim was a proponent of people doing ijtihad, the scholars who have the ability doing ijtihad and actually going to the sources and using the Maliki madhab as a framework for arriving at the strongest ruling, not as sort of a collection of rulings that you just follow uncritically, right? Some people, they think the madhab, even madhab, is like a book. So this is the Maliki book that says you pray this way, you eat this way, you do tahara this way, and this is the Shafi book, and it's not like that. The madhabs are actually schools of thought. In other words, they're frameworks, approaches, methodologies for going through the process of taking the Quran and the Sunnah and applying it to your everyday life. This is why when people try to say that there's, what's the manhaj you follow, or what's the methodology you follow, as if to say there's only one acceptable one. This is really an innovation, because during the early generations of the Muslims, even the Sahabas had differences of opinion in some cases. And then as we looked as the tradition of Sharia or Fiqh, sort of expanded, you have these different approaches, these different methodologies. And the scholars basically saw all of them as having legitimate claims to veracity, to being correct. They didn't say, well, Imam Shafi didn't say, well, I have this opinion, Imam Malik had this way, and so I'm right, he's wrong. No, they all recognized that they all had a case to be made for their varying approaches. And there's a scholar who lived in the maybe 16th century, 1500s, named Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani, may Allah be pleased with him, who wrote a book called Al-Mizan, where he looked at all the madhahib and kind of compared them all and said, their differences are really, in his opinion, were just differences of sort of ease, right? And I don't know if this is the word he used, but there's a word called itiyat, which means precaution, right? So, just that balance between giving the people a certain amount of ease, but also being cautious about your deen. In any case, I see a lot of synergy between Sheikh Ibrahim's way and the Azhari school. Tayyib. So alhamdulillah, that was a nice long kind of introduction, rumination, meditation on, the nature of madhab. But this is good. Sheikh Ibrahim Sheikh Amin taught me a lot and taught us a lot in these kinds of exchanges. We learned a lot about usul, which is sort of the foundations. Usul al-fiqh is the foundations of fiqh. We also learned a lot about iman or aqidah, theology. But those subjects he taught more so by answering questions or going down different, what's the word I want to use? For lack of a better word, digressions, right? Where he would, we would go away from what was in the text and he would start talking about these other subjects. And a lot of what we learned came from that, right? So this is a chance for us to learn a lot about just sort of what is the madhab and what is fiqh and what is this methodology that we follow. Alhamdulillah. So with that said, we don't have so much time, but I'm gonna make sure we get to the book, inshallah ta'ala. I want to start by reading a hadith because this is something that we've come to do. And I was actually going to read a little bit of a long one, but I'm not going to do that for time's sake. I'm going to save that until our next class. So I'm going to find a shorter one, inshallah ta'ala, just for the barakah. And, some of the hadith I read, a hadith that I've, had the opportunity to study with people and take from people, and some of them are not. Some of them are just hadith that I found in books that I think are relevant. And my understanding from my teachers is that this is permissible. There are some hadith books and some hadith narrations that are really just for scholars, because if you don't have the proper context, they could lead a person astray. And there are some hadith books and hadith narrations that are just good for everybody to read. Right. So I encourage everybody, read Quran, read hadith, engage with the sources. When you read hadith for yourself, maybe you read a book like Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, or maybe you read a book like Imam Nawawi's Riyadh al-Salihin. This is another collection from Imam Nawawi called Kitab al-Adhkar, that they translated as the Book of Remembrances. Maybe you read something like, even something like Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, but those books are books that are a little bit more specialized. So, I would caution people from trying to take those ahadith if they're not clear, right? And trying to implement them without first going to somebody who has, more knowledge to help you put it in context. But I'm just going to read this quick one, inshallah ta'ala. So this is what Imam Nawawi has to say about what to say if you get angry. I'm not going to read the whole hadith, but he starts by quoting a verse from Quran that translates to, and if shaitan, a'udhu billah, incites you to provoke hostility, seek refuge in Allah. He is the all-hearing and the all-knowing. And Imam Nawawi says, we relate in the Sahihs of Al-Bukhari and Muslim that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, truly the strong person is not the one who is strong in wrestling, or fighting or combat. The strong person is he, or we can say he or she, who controls themselves in moments of anger, right? And there's another hadith that I remember, I forget who it was, but one teacher, he was giving a talk, and he said, if you want to learn a hadith, here's the shortest hadith, la taghdab, don't get angry. Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la taghdab, don't get angry. So, I don't share that for any particular reason. Nobody got angry with me recently or anything like that. But, for the barakah, we want to share hadith. This is something Sheikh Amin would do often. And also, as we prepare psychologically for Ramadan coming up in just over a month, inshallah ta'ala, we want to be mindful of the fact that part of what we can do to protect our fast is control our anger, right? So we can start working now, inshallah ta'ala, on curbing our anger so that by the time Ramadan comes up, we'll be in that habit, inshallah. Tayyib. So with the last however many minutes, I'll go a little bit after 10 so we can get some time in with the text, inshallah, and have some question and answers, but I'm not going to go too long after 10, inshallah. We're going to continue with the discussion in the book that deals with missed prayers. And this is, there's a lot of different aspects of this discussion in our book. And we have, I think between today's class and next class, maybe we'll finish it, inshallah. Maybe we'll finish it, inshallah. Might need this class and 2 more classes if we get into a digression, but hopefully maybe in 2 classes, inshallah. Tayyib. Bismillah. So now we're going to look at what the ma'moon does, the ma'moon and missed previous prayer. So this is a discussion about how to make up missed previous prayers. If you are, how that discussion relates to the ma'moon, put it like that. Okay, bismillah. The ma'moon is the person who's a follower in prayer, as opposed to the imam, who's the leader in prayer. The man who's leading the prayer, the imam should always be a man, or the person who's praying alone, right? And the imam should always be a man, but I'll say, just so that nobody's sort of confused if they've heard something different. There's an opinion in the Shafi madhab and maybe some of the other madhahib that the woman can lead the women in prayer, right? So women can pray in Jamaat and a woman can lead the prayer. I don't know if they have a different sort of, I don't know if they call that imam or not, but the woman can lead the women in prayer. The Maliki opinion is generally that if the women are praying, then they should pray alone. They shouldn't pray in a group. But the opinion from the other madhab that a woman can lead women in prayer is a valid opinion. So if you're in a group of sisters for the sisters and the women are praying together, you have the right to follow that opinion. It doesn't invalidate your prayer or anything like that. But in a mixed congregation, the imam should be a man, and the ma'moon is the person who's following the imam in prayer. So the ma'moon must cut their prayer when the imam cuts his prayer, after remembering that he has to do a small number of prayers. So we talked about this last week. If the imam is leading salat and in the middle of leading salat, he realizes he has some previous prayers that he has to do, then he has to cut his prayers and go do those previous prayers. We talked about that at length. So check out the YouTube video from the last couple classes if you need more explanation on that, inshallah. If this prayer is Dhuhr, for example, and the ma'moon has done Dhuhr at home and is now doing it in congregation, he also must cut his prayer. The ma'moon cut their prayer not because they did not pray Dhuhr and Asr, as in the case of the imam praying Maghrib and remembering that he did not pray Dhuhr and Asr, but because the imam has cut his prayer. So let me break this down a little bit, inshallah ta'ala. I'll read it again and then I'll explain it a bit more. So the ma'moon must cut their prayer. The followers of the imam must cut their prayer when the imam cuts his prayer, after remembering that he has to do a small number of previous prayers, and that's less than a day's worth of prayers. If this prayer is Dhuhr, for example, and the ma'moon has done Dhuhr at home and is now doing it in congregation, he must also cut his prayer. The ma'moon cut their prayer not because they did not pray Dhuhr and Asr, as in the case of the imam, who remembers that he owes Dhuhr or Asr, but because the imam has cut his prayer. So what they're saying here is, let's say you have prayed your Dhuhr at home, and then you come and you're in a congregation, or you pray Dhuhr by yourself, and now you have the chance to make it in a congregation. This is a good practice. If you made your salah, and then you come across a group that's making the prayer in congregation, and the time of the prayer is still in, they're not making the prayer later or anything like that, it's good if you join the congregation, and the prayer that you prayed by yourself becomes like a nafila, becomes like an extra sunnah prayer that you made. So in that case, this person is praying. Let's say you prayed your Dhuhr, now you're praying Dhuhr with the imam. Or let's say you prayed Dhuhr and now you're praying Asr with the imam. And the imam realizes that he owes a previous prayer. Maybe you're praying Dhuhr and the imam realizes, oh, I never prayed Salatul Subh, Salatul Fajr, right? Or let's say you're making Asr with the imam and the imam realizes, oh, I didn't pray Salatul Dhuhr. He has to cut his prayer because before he can make Asr, he has to make Dhuhr, right? But you, as the ma'moon, you've already prayed Dhuhr, but you can't continue your prayer after the imam cuts his prayer. So let's say the imam cuts his prayer because he lost his wudu. he broke wind while he was praying. Okay, he stops and goes to make wudu, but you can keep praying. You can either push somebody from your ranks among the men to be the new imam, or the imam can select someone to be the new imam, and that's fine. Or you can continue your prayer by yourself if for some reason, like let's say it was just you and the imam, right? Then you can continue the prayer by yourself after the imam leaves. But that's not the case when the imam cuts his prayer because he owes some previous prayers. So depending on, and we covered this last week, when the imam remembers that he has to make up some previous prayers, he may complete 2 rakah and salam out to make that like a nafila, and then go make his previous prayer that he owed, in which case you salam out with him, and then you start your prayer over from the beginning. Or if he remembers, and just cuts his prayer, he remembers in the first rakah before he goes into sajda, he remembers, oh, I have to make dhuhr, and I'm leading asr, right? Then you as the follower should also cut your prayer, right? And if you're the imam and you're in that situation, you have the responsibility to let the people behind you know, I'm cutting my prayer because I didn't pray dhuhr. So you need to make up your prayer. Because if not, they may think you just left because you lost wudu. They may try to keep their prayer. So you got to tell them, no, the prayer is not valid. We were praying asr together, and I remembered I didn't make dhuhr. So your prayer is not valid. You have to start your prayer from the beginning. I have to go make dhuhr, right? And this is the proper way that should go, inshallah ta'ala. When you are a ma'moon and you remember that you did not pray dhuhr and asr, so now they're saying, let's say you're praying maghrib, right? And you're the ma'moon in the prayer. You're the follower of the imam in maghrib, and you remember that you didn't make your dhuhr and you didn't make asr. And the imam and everyone else in the congregation do not have any previous prayers to make up. So everybody else is in a normal situation, right? Y'all are praying maghrib, and you realize that you didn't pray your dhuhr and asr. What should you do? In this case, you should complete the prayer behind the imam. If you knew you owed prayers before the prayer started, you shouldn't have even started the maghrib with the imam. But if you remember while you're in the middle of the prayer, then you don't cut and leave off the prayer with the imam. You finish praying maghrib with the imam, but then you should complete, after this, you must go back and pray the dhuhr and asr that you missed. Then you should say the maghrib again if there's still time remaining, right? So you're praying maghrib behind the imam. You remember in the middle of the prayer that you owe dhuhr and asr. You finish the prayer with the imam, right? Then you go back and you pray your dhuhr and your asr, and then you remake your maghrib, right? So maghrib you make would be sort of like a sunnah in that case. But if the maghrib is, if this happens,
man, you put the bang.
Sorry, yeah, keep your stuff on mute, inshallah. But if you're praying, for some reason, you finish maghrib with the imam, then you make dhuhr and asr, and then for some reason, I don't know why this will happen, for some reason, when you go to remake your maghrib, fajr is about to come in, and you don't have enough time to make maghrib and isha before fajr comes in, then in that case, you wouldn't make up the maghrib. You would the maghrib that you made would be sufficient. You would have prayed out of order, which would have been an incorrect thing, but you'd be forgiven for it, inshallah, because you did so out of forgetfulness, right? And you didn't have time to remake the maghrib before the time of prayer went out. So I'm going to answer a couple questions that I see people have typed and I want to ask, but I also want to ask, is that clear? If that's not clear, ask me a follow-up question so we can make that clear, inshallah. So Sidi Ishaq said in the chat, is this only for maghrib because of the short time frame of maghrib? No, it's not only for maghrib. It's the same if you were praying, say, Salatul Subh, or say you're praying Salatul Asr with the imam, and you remember that you didn't make your Salatul Asr, right? That you didn't make your Salatul Dhuhr. You don't just leave the prayer. You finish with the imam, then you go back and pray your dhuhr and then make up your asr, right? Unless the time is so short that maghrib is about to come in. Alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for joining. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless you and reward you. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Sayyida Zainab, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. I see you have your hand up.
Walaikum assalam. Sorry, I have a two-part question. I am kind of confused, but the first question is in regards to when the imam breaks wind or he steps out of the prayer and selecting someone else, because I've seen this happen and it just causes confusion, which made me think, is this even valid to continue?
Okay.
Because no one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And then my second question was, let's say you forget that you need to make Fajr, but then you go to Juma. Is it better to just sit and listen to the khutbah because you're not supposed to like go in and do a bunch of stuff, or is it better to like make it up before the congregation no prayer?
Great question. So to answer your first question, yeah, I mean, a lot of times when people haven't had the chance to take this information, particularly in a place where in a non-majority Muslim country, or a place where you don't have, because in majority Muslim countries you usually have, and even this isn't always the case. You got cases like Bosnia where there was a war and they systematically made it hard for people to maintain their deen. But generally speaking, you'll usually find in like Muslim communities, like even the big masajid where you have people who are more educated, you'll find enough people who know this kind of stuff that they'll kind of like help direct traffic, right? Like if the imam leaves and somebody, steps up to take his place, or he pulls somebody to take his place, right? If people are kind of confused, you'll find, maybe some of the elder brothers and sisters who like, a kind of motion in the prayer, like, no, they know what they're doing, right? But if you're in a situation where you don't have that, and you see something like this happening, right? You operate based on your knowledge. If you can keep the prayer, and you can discuss everything after the prayer is over. So if the imam pulls somebody to take his place because he broke his wudu, and some people are like, what's going on? What's going on? You know what's going on. So you continue to finish the prayer with the new imam, right? If you can, right? And then after the prayer is finished, you can explain to the people who are confused, or the imam can explain to the people, or y'all can explain together, this is why the imam did that, and it was perfectly valid. And if people aren't satisfied with the explanation, then they do what they think is best, but that's not your concern, Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know the exact situation. Did the person that the imam brought up to be the new imam, did he not know what was going on and just not finish the prayer? Or?
No, I don't. To be honest, it was just I was at a masjid in Lower Manhattan. I think the imam, it was different. It was like he was traveling, so he led the prayer. Then he was like, "Oh, I'm actually traveling," but then I was in the women's section.
Yeah.
They just stopped, but no one said anything. He just said he's a traveler.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is confusing. I mean, if he's so just so you know, if you're in that situation, if the imam is traveling, then when he salams out, then yes, the people get up and finish the prayer. But nobody takes his place as the imam. Everybody just gets up and finishes their remaining 2 rakat as individuals, right?
Oh, okay.
And if a person is a traveler and they're praying with non-travelers, then it's good for them to lead the prayer, because then they get to take the allowance that Allah gives the traveler, right? And the people, because he can't, or he can't follow behind an imam and salam out early. So if I'm a traveler and I'm praying with people who are residents, I can't say, okay, well, I follow you all and I just have to 2 rakat salam out. No, I either got to pray the full 4 behind the imam, or I can lead and salam out after 2 rakat and everybody behind me can finish. So it's good if the traveling person, if they're qualified, if they know how to lead the prayer, that they be the imam, if they're traveling. Now, if you're in a masjid and you're traveling and the imam of the masjid, you don't go say, hey, imam, let me lead the prayer because I'm the traveler. No, you pray behind them and you pray your 4 rakat, right? Or you could even pray your 2 rakat as a traveler. And if you find yourself in the masjid when they're praying in congregation, you can pray that with the congregation as a nafila, right? Okay. So the imam who was traveling, that's fine. He salamed out. Everybody's supposed to get up and finish their 2 rakat afterward. But in a situation where you're really just floored, you're just confused, you don't know what to do. I don't know if my prayer is valid. When in doubt, pray again. When in doubt, pray again, and then bring the question to the class so that we can figure it out, inshallah, so that next time, maybe you won't have to pray again. You'll be able to keep your prayer. Okay. So that's the first question. Second question, subhanAllah, what was your second question?
So if you forget that you didn't make Fajr and you go to Juma. Got
it. So if you forget to pray Salatul Subh, you forget to pray Salatul Fajr. When in doubt, pray again and then sorry. I was just refreshing the YouTube page in case anybody had any questions there. Sorry. But if you forget to pray Salatul Subh, which is also called Salatul Fajr, and you remember before you head out for Salatul Jum'ah, then you should pray your Salatul Subh first, even if that means you're going to be late to Salatul Jum'ah, right? If you forget to pray your Salatul Subh and it's Jum'ah, say tomorrow, it's Jum'ah day. If I forget to pray my Salatul Subh and I look up, like, oh, I got about to go to Jum'ah. Oh, I didn't pray Salatul Subh. It's better for me to pray my Salatul Subh before I go so that I'm not in the position of having to pray my Salatul Subh, in front of the people during the khutbah of Jummah, right? Let's say I get to Jummah and I realize I didn't pray my Salatul Subh, right? If they haven't started Jummah yet, cool. Make my Salatul Subh as soon as I remember. And I made it. The people will think I made a nafila before Jummah started. It's all good. But let's say I don't remember until I'm sitting in the Jummah and the khutbah is going on. What do? In that case, you still get up, you pray your Salatul Subh. Because once you remember that you owe a previous prayer, especially if it's a small, just one prayer, 2 prayers or something like that, less than a day's worth of prayers, you make it as soon as possible, right? The only reason to postpone it would be you got to go to the bathroom, can't hold it, or you haven't eaten anything and you're so hungry you're lightheaded or something like that, right? Or something like this, But for the most part, you wouldn't delay it for anything. So if you're sitting in the khutbah and you remember that you didn't pray Salatul Subh, you got to get up and pray Salatul Subh, right? And the people may think you're making a nafila. And, if they're knowledgeable people who follow the Maliki madhab, they may tell you afterward, oh, sister, you really weren't supposed to make nafila during the khutbah, right? And then you may say, oh, I forgot that I remembered that I hadn't made Salatul Subh, so I had to stand up and make it. And that should be simple, right? Nobody should mess with you after that, right? But if you can avoid it, you want to avoid it because you don't want to make people think that you don't want to give people the impression that it's good to make nafila during the khutbah, because our position is that you shouldn't do that. And if they see you, especially if they know you're somebody who's studying your deen, they may think, oh, she did it or he did it, and that means that that's the right thing to do. So if you can avoid it, you should avoid it. But sometimes you can't avoid it. If Allah causes you to remember during the khutbah that you didn't make your Salatul Subh, then you got to make your Salatul Subh during the khutbah, right? It's as simple as that. Let's say you didn't make Salatul Subh, right? Then in that case, my advice, and I guess I already said this, but in that case, my advice would be make it before you get to Jummah. Don't put yourself in that situation. If you have the ability, if you remember before you leave the house, to make it before you leave the house. But if you don't remember until you're already in the midst of the khutbah, right? Or let's say you drive into Jummah and you realize, oh, I didn't make Salatul Subh, and I'm 5 minutes away from the masjid. I don't have no wudu. Okay, you go to the masjid, you go make your wudu, and then you'll have to make your Salatul Subh during the khutbah because you don't really have an option, right? If there's an area where you can kind of go and pray and be safe and secure where the people don't see you, like some masajid will have different little areas where maybe you kind of dip off and pray, like I remember in 96th Street, because I was studying with Sheikh Amin. If people in New York, you may know the layout of 96th Street downstairs. There's like a little office. The Sheikh Amin's office was like in this little nook. So I remember, I don't know if I actually ever had to, I might have had to do this once or twice, but I remember like if ever I was in a situation where I had to pray and make a makeup prayer and didn't want the people to see, I could go in that nook, right? If it was open, right? But, sometimes you don't have that ability. And if you don't have that ability, then you have to just pray in front of the people. And if someone gives you ask you about it afterward, then you can just tell them, oh, I had to make up a previous prayer. I forgot and I remembered after I got to the masjid. Sidi Ishaq, I see your hand is up. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Bismillah ar-Rahim. So to follow up with the sister's question, 2 questions, and then I just want to review the notes for this what I wrote down. One is listening to the khutbah, the speaking, listening to the imam, is that fard? And the second question is, if the person comes late to Jummah and they're actually making the salat part of Jummah, what should they do? Then after that, I would like to just review these steps for what we just talked about, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. So, so you said, is listening to the khutbah fard, and what was the second question?
If the person comes late to the Jummah, they forgot their Salatul Subh, and they came to Jummah when they're actually in the ranks, they get in the ranks to pray. Right. And then they remember while they're in the ranks.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the first question, yes, listening to the khutbah is fard, but if you come late, you don't have to make up anything. If you miss the khutbah, but you get there in time for the prayer, then you make the prayer and you don't have to make up anything. But listening to the khutbah is fard in that it's not like you can say, well, I'm gonna go get me a little snack and I'll intentionally get to Jummah when the prayer comes. I'm not great with time, so I definitely come to Jummah late from time to time, right? But it's never an intentional thing. You shouldn't plan to get to Jummah late, right? Because the khutbah is a fard. And if you have the ability to listen to the khutbah, you shouldn't go do something else. You have to sit and listen to the fard, even to the point that you should be careful not to do anything that distracts other people, right? Like if you come into the Jummah, you don't come and sit down, oh, assalamu alaikum, brother, assalamu alaikum, sister. You just sit, and listen to the khutbah. And you avoid doing things that will distract people, because it's hard for everybody to listen to the khutbah. I guess technically we would say it's mustahab for the women because they don't have to come to Jummah, but it's far in the sense that that's what you should be doing at the time. Everybody should be listening to the khutbah, not talking, not doing other things that would distract from it. Now, in terms of your second question, that actually speaks to what we're learning about now. Once you're behind the imam, and before you review what you wanted to review, I want to just finish this page real quick because we're almost done. But this is the lesson that we're actually learning now. What if you're praying behind the imam and you remember while you're praying behind the imam that you missed a prayer? In that situation, you finish the prayer behind the imam and then you make the prayer up. So let's say you remember, you started praying behind the imam, Salatul Subh, and you remember, Salatul Jummah, and you remember, I didn't pray Salatul Subh. What do? You finish making Jummah with the imam, then you pray your Salatul Subh, and then I would pray Salatul Dhuhr, right? I think there might be different opinions as to whether you should pray Jummah or Dhuhr in that situation. I don't remember which, I think there's 2 opinions about that, if I remember correctly. But I would pray Salatul Dhuhr, right? I would treat it as this Salatul Jummah was, a nafila, that I prayed because, the fiqh tells me I should pray behind the imam. Once I started praying behind the imam, then I make my Salatul Subh, and then I make my Salatul Dhuhr, because now the time of Jummah has passed, so I'm going to make my Salatul Dhuhr. And Allah is most merciful. If you legitimately forgot and you sat through the khutbah and you made Salatul Jummah and you remembered in Salatul Jummah that you forgot Salatul Subh, then we have faith that Allah is going to give you the reward like if you made Jummah, right? Because that was your intention. And first hadith in Imam Nawawi, actions are judged by intentions. But the proper etiquette in that situation would be after you finish Jummah with the imam, go back and make up your Salatul Subh and then make Salatul Dhuhr to cover yourself, because of the fact that technically your Jummah was technically not valid because you didn't make Salatul Subh, because you owed Salatul Subh and you remembered it while you were in the middle of Jummah. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me, something you said reminded me. If we're on, for example, security detail for Jummah,
Yeah.
Do we make 4 rakah or do we make 2 rakah?
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. That if you text me, I'll have an answer for you next week. If you text me to remind me, because I can ask some of my teachers. But I'm actually not sure about that one. I've wondered that myself, you know. Obviously, if you're on security detail, you haven't done anything wrong, because you doing security is what's enabling the Muslims to be able to make their Jummah securely, right? So it's a good thing. It's a blessed thing. But I'm not sure whether you would go back and make 2 rakah for Salatul Jummah or 4 rakah for Salatul Dhuhr, right? So let me ask and see. When in doubt, if you make your Salatul Dhuhr, then you're covered, right? But inshallah, shoot me a text and I can double check that to give you a firmer answer, inshallah, next week.
Inshallah.
Cool? Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. And I like when that happens, man, because then I get to learn something too.
Alhamdulillah.
I just had a quick follow-up question with
Sure.
Juma. When you say you come in and you're not supposed to have any distractions or do anything, does that include having zikr beads in your hand? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Or it should just be no, you're tapped in, and
there's different opinions about that. Sheikh Amin would say you shouldn't be making dhikr during the khutbah or even doing a lecture, really. You should be listening to the khutbah. So that would be my answer. If you see someone who is making dhikr during the khutbah, I wouldn't make a big deal out of it, because there are different traditions that indicate that, if a person wants to say prayers on the Prophet ﷺ throughout the whole Jumu'ah, it's not haram, right? So, that's that person's prerogative. But the advice we have from Sheikh Amin is when you listen into the Jumu'ah, you should be dialed into the Jumu'ah, right? And if I go to the halaqah or just to hear a talk at the masjid, I might sit in the back and make dhikr. But if I'm in class, if I'm sitting with Sheikh Amin, I'm not going to be making dhikr, because I need to be focused on the class. You follow what I'm saying? So there's some discretion, but generally speaking, in the khutbah is time to sit and listen to the khutbah. Okay, now let me try to finish this really quickly. So we already talked about how if you're praying behind the imam and you remember that you missed a prayer, that you should finish the prayer with the imam and then go back and make your prayer that you missed, and then remake the prayer you did with the imam if there's time before it goes out. So then it goes on to say, why should you stay with the imam? Meaning, why should you finish the prayer with the imam even after you remember that you have a prayer to make up? If you leave the imam to pray away from him, establishing another prayer, someone will say, oh, maybe this is a bad time. Maybe something's going on with this masjid. Maybe something's going on with this imam. So Islam creates respect around the imam. The respect is so that the people would trust what he says. If they have doubt about the imam, they will not follow or respect him. So it's considered bad etiquette to leave the prayer with the imam. We want to have we want to encourage and exhibit unity, right? And a part of that is, if you start the prayer with the imam, finish the prayer with the imam, and then go make up the prayer you missed. Similarly, like we said, if a person's traveling, and they're praying behind an imam who's not traveling, they should still finish the prayer with the imam, because if they salam out early, this is bad etiquette to break away from the imam once you've already started the prayer with the imam. Just to continue, the ma'moon does not say the present prayer because it is more important than the previous prayer, because the opposite is true. The previous prayer is actually what takes priority over the present prayer. Meaning, if you forgot to pray Salatul Dhuhr and you're praying Salatul Asr, Salatul Dhuhr is more important, right? If you're praying Salatul Dhuhr and you forgot to pray Salatul Subh, right? Salatul Subh is more important, right? But you complete the prayer behind the imam because Islam or the fiqh or the Sharia discourages us, really doesn't allow us to leave the imam without it doesn't allow us to leave the imam, unless of course the imam salams out or something like that. It doesn't allow us to break away from the prayer of the imam. And it says here, with or without salams, right? So it doesn't matter whether you salam out of the prayer or just leave the prayer, it's all the same, right? You shouldn't do it. The people may not necessarily ask the person why he or she left the prayer alone, but they may ask themselves, and they may answer themselves, meaning they may start to make some assumptions. And I'll stop there. And everything that we said so far is for the Fard prayer, right? It's for the Fard prayer. I'll stop there. There's only a few more sentences, but I want to, not go too long. But inshallah ta'ala, we will finish up this section, hopefully the next section next week, inshallah ta'ala. Does anybody have any questions? We'll take a couple, inshallah, before we close out for the day. And if anybody, I don't think there's anybody, there may be one person on YouTube, but if anybody on YouTube has a question, you can type it in the chat on YouTube. And here on Zoom, of course, you all know the drill. You can raise your hand or you can type in the chat. Assalamu alaikum. Sidi Yahya, how you doing, Uncle?
Alaikum salam to barakatuh. I'm not too good on this technology, but I'm learning. Just wanted to say something to all the brothers and sisters. There's a brother that is in Pennsylvania. He just had open heart surgery, and I actually seen him on the duel yesterday. He's here by Allah's grace, but this, could you make dua for him and his family, inshallah?
Inshallah. Inshallah. What's his name? If you want to share his name, you don't have to if you want to keep it private. Huh?
Name is
Sharif?
Yes, Sharif.
Okay, inshallah, we make dua for this is not Brother Sharif in New York, is it?
Yeah, Sharif Muhammad. He's used to be a bus driver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Inshallah, we make dua for Brother Sharif. We're gonna do Fatiha. And for those who know it, we're gonna say Fatiha and we're gonna say Salatul Fatih on the Prophet Islam, pray on the Prophet Islam 3 times. Inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح We pray Allah give the brother shifa quickly and completely, make it easy for him and his family, comfort them, support them, help them, make this trial a means of expiation of sins and a means to get closer to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and relieve them of the burden by curing him and giving him a complete and quick recovery. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for that. Brother Yahya. That's important. We have to pray for each other. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So can I do a quick recap?
Yep.
So when we are the Ma'moon, if the Imam cuts his prayer for because he forgot that he had a prayer to make up, then we have to cut our prayer.
Yes.
Okay. For any other reason, pass gas or anything, then we continue our prayer.
So not any other reason. There's some reasons where if the Imam, like let's say the Imam remembers that he didn't have wudu from the beginning, right? Then when he stops, he would say, y'all, I didn't have wudu, so that prayer is not valid. You got to start your prayer from the beginning, right? But if he lost wudu during the prayer, that's a situation where he can bring somebody else to finish leading the prayer and he can go make wudu, renew his wudu to be able to return to the prayer.
Okay. Thank you for that. If a person is a ma'moon and starts praying with the imam but forgot that they did not pray a previous prayer, they must finish the prayer with the imam. Then after salam, make the prayer that was missed. And then make the prayer that you pray with the imam again, and count the first one as a sunnah.
Right.
If the mandatory time of the prayer is not out.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
And
go ahead.
And if it's Jumu'ah prayer, then you make Lord.
Yeah. Exactly. And in terms of the and you may find I think there's 2 opinions about that. I think some say you can make the Jumu'ah, but I think the stronger opinion is that you should make Lord. But if you encounter somebody who says you can make Jumu'ah, I think there's a basis for that. I think that's an opinion, But the opinion that I'm giving you is that you should make dhuhr in that situation. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, something you said that I wanted to clarify, but I lost it. Alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thank you for joining us. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you. Alhamdulillah, you enjoy your day as well. Alhamdulillah. Sidi Ishaq, what did you say?
The last thing I said before Juma said if the mandatory time of the prayer is out.
Right. So actually the books will say that if you have to make up the prayer for that reason, like you prayed Maghrib with the Imam, but you realized you forgot you made Dhuhr and Asr, so you made your Dhuhr and Asr and then remade Maghrib. The Maghrib, remaking the Maghrib is technically a mustahab, right? If it was a fard, then you would have to make it even if the time went out. So remaking the Maghrib is a mustahab, but it's a mustahab that you should do, if you have the ability to do it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So just a clarifying point that you'll find in some of the books.
Thank you for that.
Alhamdulillah, no problem. Thank you for that. Thank you for the question and the review. Alhamdulillah. It makes me happy. Get the notes together.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Do we have maybe one more question before we close out for the day? Inshallah. It could be on this subject or general questions. Someone said, does the 2 rakat for Jum'ah replace the mandatory 4 rakats of Dhuhr? Yes. And some of the scholars, some of the books, they say the khutbah counts as like the first 2 rakah, and the 2 rakah you make in the prayers like the second 2 rakah of Dhuhr, right? But like I said, if you miss the khutbah or you miss some of the khutbah, you don't have to make it up. If you come to Jummah and you step foot in the masjid while they call in the iqamah, then you make the 2 rakah Jummah with the imam, and you don't have to make anything up. You just, try to make sure you get there on time the following week, inshallah. And let me know if that doesn't answer the question, inshallah. Okay, maybe
one more question, inshallah.
Inshallah. Quick one, so we can get a 2 for 1.
If the imam is in the masjid, right, the adhan has been called, the imam is in, the people are waiting, and say there's a talk or something going, can the people pray even though the imam has not called for the iqamah to be made, to be said?
What's the situation? Why you said the imam is talking?
Right. So say there's a talk. The imam is not giving a talk, but say there's a talk, the imam is listening to the talk, and there are people who are not there for the talk. Therefore salat.
Right.
The adhan has been called. Let's say it's Isha. The adhan has been called.
Yeah.
Right. But the imam has decided to, and there's a set time, an established time to make the iqamah and everything like this. But the imam has not called for the iqamah to be made. And the people say, okay, when they get a little antsy, because they're not there for the talk, right? They're there for salat. Can those people pray?
Right. So
even though the imam has not,
No, right, got you. So I mean, if they're gonna call the iqamah soon, then it's better for the people to be patient, wait 5 minutes, 2 minutes, something like that, so they can pray in congregation. But if there's gonna be a long amount of time, right? Or the people, maybe you gotta hurry up and get to work, or maybe you gotta hurry up and pick a child up from school or something like that. Like, so you gotta go. In that case, they can pray, but they should pray individually. They shouldn't pray as a group. So let's say, like you said, there's a talk. The adhan has been called, but they're still doing this talk. And I got to pray because I got to go get to work, right? I work night shift. I got to go get to work. I'm going to have a problem. I might lose my job. What do? Then you just make your Isha, but you make it by yourself. So the people will not know if you're making sunnah or making Isha or what, So you can pray, but you shouldn't come together and make like a congregation in the masjid that prays before the established one with the imam. Follow what I'm saying?
100%. That's clear. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And if you were in the situation where, and once the adhan is called, you got to pray. Now, if the adhan hasn't been called, you may just skate out, right? And just pray later, pray at home or something like that. And also, if you happen to be in charge, like you're part of the people who plan the events in the masjid, then you want to try to avoid putting people in that antsy situation if you can, right? You want to try to like call the adhan, call the Iqamah and pray. Sometimes, it's okay if you can't, it's okay if you have to schedule things a little bit differently. And those people who need to leave, once the adhan has been called, they can stand up and they can pray their prayer of it individually and then leave, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Is there any final pressing questions that you gotta ask now? You can't wait next week. This is urgent. Okay. Well, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all for coming to visit. May Allah accept the ziyarah, the visitation of all of us to one another as Muslims, and may Allah accept our efforts to attain this knowledge, to transmit this knowledge, and may Allah give us success in implementing this knowledge and forgive us for any mistakes we make along the way in that process. بجاه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل ونعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل ونعوذ بك من غضب الدين وقهر الرجال. Oh our Lord, we seek thy refuge from anxiety and grief. We seek thy refuge from lack of strength and laziness. We seek thy refuge from cowardliness and miserliness. And we seek thy refuge from debt and oppression, the oppression of people. Bijay Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun wa salamun wa salamun ala muslim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum Jamaat. We'll see you next week, inshallah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah.